Hey everybody, Eric Hayden here in the garden. Another day with temperatures near 80 degrees, the day before Halloween. If you're watching across the eastern part of the country, a lot of you are seeing those colder temperatures move in. We're not gonna be any different. So I wanna do a quick update on the garden. If you do have a freeze or frost on the way, that is traditionally the end of your garden, especially for roses if temperatures get well down into the 20s. If you have a light frost, even a light freeze, you may still have some nice blooms right into the fall months. And that's one thing I'm going to point out in this quick tour. So we're October 30th, 2023. We're going to do a real quick tour of the garden, focus on some of the nicest blooms. You will notice that your fall blooms and your spring blooms traditionally are the best. And why is that? Comment below if you know. I'll give it a few seconds for you to answer. And the reason is cooler temperatures. I've mentioned we've been near 80 degrees during the day, but we've had nighttime lows in the 50s and 60s. That's really ideal weather. When I grew roses in upstate New York, the best blooms, occurred for a good part of the year because we had temperatures often in, low 80s during the summertime. But even during the summertime, we would have temperatures at night that were really cool. So we had some beautiful blooms year round. Speaking of nice blooms, what I'm showing you right now is Gemini. It's in my all-time top 5 favorite roses. Gemini, Gemini, Gemini. If you can get this rose, I would get it. It has form. What I mean by that is that center on that rose almost every time. And you can see the color is really nice. But back to the point, beyond Gemini, your nicest blooms are traditionally going to be in the spring months and also the fall. That, is no coincidence. That is when rose shows are planned out, because that's traditionally when the blooms are the nicest. A lot of our roses are quite tall this time of year. This is Hot Princess. It's a florist rose. You can get it from Steve Singer at Wisconsin Roses, wiroses.com. It's a nice one and it grows really tall. Another one I got from Steve many years back. It does well exhibition and also as an open bloom. This is Jewel Grace. And I'm hoping this color shows up. I know we're getting toward dusk. Those days are getting shorter quick. But you want to talk about form. That's very nice form there. And it's a nice pink, dark red, dark red bloom. But the thing that's neat on this bloom is that reverse color under the under part of the petal. It's yellow. How neat is that? So really, really nice bloom. Another nice rose, would not recommend for most gardeners unless you have a lot of time to cover it up, and that is a fern. If you want a pink rose that has a center almost every time and you want to exhibit roses, knock yourself out and get a fern. It's a huge bloom, lots of petals, and it can be really nice. I mean, I don't know if this camera is showing this phone, but this is a gigantic bloom. So really, really nice. But you'll notice the marking here. Since it has a high petal count, it can quickly get this botrytis. It's a disease. And some of them, if it gets it really bad, it almost turns into like a mummified rose. I should really cut these off because these spores are spreading in the garden. But nonetheless, I would not recommend this to the common gardener because it can look like this, but sometimes it'll look like that. That's the mummified effect that I'm talking about. On the right, beautiful, and on the left, not as much. So a fern is one I would probably stay away from unless you're an exhibitor. And what I mean by that, unless you want to do some rose shows, a fern is up there if you want to keep it clean. These are some of the maidens that were planted in the spring. I'm going to do a fertilizer video on that. Tucked beneath this weed is another top 5 rose of mine that I like, and that's Let Freedom Ring. For my all-time favorite reds, Veterans Honor is 1, and 1B is Mr. Lincoln because of the fragrance. But up there close is Let Freedom Ring. It doesn't bloom quite as prolific as Veterans Honor. It's a little later, and it doesn't, again, it's just a little later in the season usually and doesn't have quite as many blooms. But it's a great rose. It has great form. I mean, look at that. This untouched, uncovered, it can stand up in the rain. And I'm going to compare and contrast that. So Let Freedom Ring is a really nice one. I've shown you Veterans Honors many a time, but both of those look unblemished in the garden. Here's a newer red that is nice. I don't want to say it's not a nice rose. This is Mr. Caleb. It was hybridized in the Carolinas. These are 2 smaller blooms right now, but it can have a nice, well-formed bloom. I don't have one as an example right now. And it's nice. It's a pretty red. The reason why I don't like it quite as much for exhibition yes, it's a nice rose. But for a cut flower in the garden, see these blemishes on the petals? That can happen when you get any sort of rain or even a dew. You get some botrytis on the leaves like that. So not awful, but not quite as clean as Veterans Honor. A couple more before we get to dark here. This is a new one. I just responded to a comment on the YouTube channel today. Does it have a fragrance? The answer is no. This is Ring of Fire, maybe a slight fruity fragrance, but it's not, it's not considered a fragrant rose. But that color for Halloween, amazing. Prolific bloomer. I forget the cross. It might have St. Patrick or Marilyn Monroe in it. I can't remember, but I guess the only downside is it could be a little winter tender that I've read. I have not noticed it here, and we get down into the teens, but it's one of my better growing bushes. And again, I'm not just picking any of these out that have been covered up or anything. These have just been sitting here. Look at that form, pretty much on every one. So nice rose as we get into the Halloween season. That is Ring of Fire. You can tell it's one of the better growing roses. I'm gonna have to do something with it this winter, and especially the spring. We had a bad thunderstorm and it blew over, so I've got to straighten this back up or figure out what I'm gonna do. One that's Ring of Fire is pretty easy to get in commerce. Another one that's really easy is Pope John Paul II. I've been really impressed with this. It's a brilliant white. I've never seen it on a lot of exhibition tables. I keep mentioning that because I do a lot of rose shows, but it has decent form. Just a really nice white rose, but the thing that you can't see in this video is the smell, the fragrance. It's definitely got a citrusy smell to it. This is our fragrance garden, so that's why it's over here. I'm gonna do a total video on this when I get time. The best yellow rose you can get, I could be pronouncing it wrong, Peyadus. Palatine Roses sells it. In our country, United States, it's sold as Elina, E-L-I-N-A. But it is by far the best growing yellow rose I've ever seen. This fence is 6 feet high. It's taller than that, and it's not quite as wide, but it's not that far off. So it grows great. I just showed you the hybrid T form of it. It also opens up to just awesome, awesome, awesome open blooms. The only downside of this, and I've only noticed it here, is we have thrips. Those are those pesky little things that cause this brown marking on the petal that you see on the outside. That's the only downside. We have a major problem here, so that brown marking there. They like light color roses, so this is not as clean of a bloom as it has been for me in upstate New York. That's it. In terms of growth, I mean, you get hybrid T form, so if you want to do rose shows, you can exhibit. If you want to do the open bloom, you can do that. And anytime I'm recommending a rose in the garden, Veterans Honor, Gemini, for your reds with Veterans Honor, Mr. Lincoln for your fragrance. But if you want a yellow, that's the one I try to graft for people because it's just outstanding. So we're gonna wrap things up, and I just think this is awesome. If you've been a follower of my channel for a long time, you've seen this before, but I'm gonna show you again. This is the most clear-cut example of the original and the sport. So the quick backstory, if you haven't already heard it, an original rose here is Folklore. It's bred by Cortus, a German rose. It tends to do better in cooler climates. So here it tends to do well in the fall when we have those shorter days, the lower sun angle. Just a really nice rose from the 70s, really, really nice. The sport of Folklore is European Touch. And what a sport is a genetic mutation. So you come out one day and instead of an orange rose, you have an apricot rose. And this was grafted and it remains stable, meaning when it comes back as apricot. So that's European Touch, and the original is Folklore. The quick backstory, this European Touch, I had an original in my dad's garden. He gave it to me. I won second place in the Fall National Rose Show in Syracuse, New York, 2015. I got first, second, and third. And the bush won second was European Touch. Dug up the rose when we moved. Didn't have room for it, so I planted it in my dad's garden. Took a cutting and rooted it. And this is a copy of my dad's rose bush. So this is a copy of the European Touch that won second place in the Fall Nationals. Pretty neat story, right? Made a copy of it in 2016. Here it is, 2023. It's in my garden. Well, a couple years later, I came out to the garden and all apricot roses, but one of them was orange. It had reverted back. I took that stem, I was able to successfully root it, made a copy, and this is Folklore, a copy of European Touch, but the reversion back to Folklore. So kind of a neat story. It is not widely in commerce. Folklore is, European Touch is not, but if you're interested in those, pretty neat rows and pretty easy to root, as evident by those 2 copies. And we're going to end with this because this just caught my eye. The form is not good, but the fragrance is there. Fragrant Cloud. You could just smell that through the video you're watching now. It briefly has form when it first blooms, then it opens up pretty quickly, so it's not the most long-lasting cut flower, but you can see from my hand it's a gigantic bloom. Very, very nice. And I said that was it, but I just love showing roses, and I hope you enjoy. As we walk over here, you cannot say gigantic bloom, all puns intended, without showing you Dolly Parton. Even in these weeds, which are a mess and we're still working on, one of the biggest blooms you'll find on a rose is Dolly Parton. You can get that in commerce. It is fragrant. I like it a little bit better than Fragrant Cloud because it's a bigger bloom. It's just as fragrant, and it does have form initially. There's some more petals to it, so it holds longer as a cut flower. And since we're in the fragrant garden, I mentioned my favorite rose is Veteran's Honor for a red. My second favorite, close second, is Mr. Lincoln. Beautiful red. It goes from closed or hybrid T form to open really quickly. That's the only reason why I rank it second to Veteran's Honor, because it doesn't last as long in the vase. You cannot refrigerate it. It will turn kind of a purplish hue, which is interesting, but that fragrance is outstanding. If you are just watching this video and you want 3 roses, I would recommend Mr. Lincoln for your fragrance, Elina, E-L-I-N-A, for a yellow, well-growing rose, and then Veteran's Honor for another long stem red rose. That's great. Happy Halloween, everyone. It is October 30th, 2023. Garden looking good despite some weeds and lack of spraying. We'll get back at it, and hopefully 2024 will be even better. We'll send you off with Marilyn Monroe. Beautiful apricot rose, thorny, but it produces very nice blooms like this. Have a good one, everyone.